To my right is Mr. Steve Schneid, who is the senior consultant to the Senate Transportation Committee. And to my left is my legislative assistant, Mr. Dario Fromer, who has been coordinating this event. We'd also like to thank American Cablevision for broadcasting this event so that people in South Pasadena and other environments can have access to the testimony and the witnesses who will be coming forth this evening. We also like to thank Mr. Ted Shaw for helping us put this hearing together and many of the residents who helped in formulating the aspects of the issues that we might raise here this evening. I call this hearing as a member of the Senate Transportation Committee to give the people of El Sereno and South Pasadena an opportunity to get a more precise understanding of the status of this proposed freeway extension and how it will impact their communities and our communities as a whole. Hopefully the hearing will also give those responsible for highway planning an opportunity to hear from the communities which would be impacted by the 710 extension. One of my responsibilities as a member of the Transportation Committee is to ensure that the California Department of Transportation is making prudent, considerate public policy. So I'm here to listen and to learn as well. We have been talking about completing this freeway in one form or another since 1953. And for the past 20 years, the people of South Pasadena and El Sereno have asked one thing of the state highway planners. If you're going to build a freeway through our communities, ask us where we want it built and why you're planning to build it there. On November 4th, South Pasadena voters will again have an opportunity to express their preference on where the freeway should be built or whether it should be built at all. I am concerned that after so many efforts to find freeway routes acceptable to the people of this community, Caltrans is now seeking final approval for a route which is not much different from the one they advocated in 1953 and which has been strongly opposed by this community. We are going to have a list of witnesses that will be coming forward to bring us their testimony. I would also like to welcome and thank the members of the South Pasadena City Council who are here this evening for their support and efforts in trying to come forward with an objective hearing. Our first witness this evening is the mayor of the city of South Pasadena, the Honorable Lee Prentice. Mr. Prentice, please come forward.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll keep my comments brief, but I'd like to go into the historic significance of this freeway and what has occurred to South Pasadena since the early 50s. I've seen a copy of a map dated 1956 where the freeway for Alhambra and Pasadena was signed. And on that map, they had the freeway joined together, but the most amazing thing about the map, they didn't have the city of South Pasadena in it. What it looked like was Caltrans, or the Department of Highways in 1956, forgot there was a city of South Pasadena, signed Alhambra and Pasadena without even considering the city of South Pasadena. For the next 30 years, they've been trying to justify this error, because if you follow the freeway from Pasadena through the Long Beach Harbor, it skirts virtually every city, goes along, meanders, not a straight north-south line, it meanders through the city lines and on the outskirts of all cities, except for South Pasadena, where it goes dead center. At one time, it was supposed to go up Garfield, and San Marino moved it over. So now we're stuck with it in South Pasadena. We've had problems. They passed a special bill called Martinez 1623 so that we didn't have the right to object to the freeway anymore. If you read that piece of legislation, it can only apply to one community, South Pasadena. It's singled us out. During the hearings approximately a year and a half ago, conducted by the chairman of the California Transportation Commission, Judith Hopkins, I objected to her holding the hearings as chairman because she used to work for Pasadena Community Redevelopment Agency, was a builder herself of high-rise office buildings along freeways. She said there was no conflict of interest. They wouldn't allow all of our witnesses to appear. Other witnesses, they allowed lengthy testimony. And the whole hearing was almost ramrodded through. They said they'd make a decision, and when it came time to make a decision a month later, she didn't vote in the decision, but the decision was made to go the Meridian route. I objected to at that time about 4F housing, which is the historical housing. They told me at that meeting that it wasn't significant, the federal government didn't care about it, and they didn't care about it. And then a few months ago, we were surprised again that Caltrans comes up with this Meridian Variation, which moves the freeway 900 feet over. Apparently this, not anything we asked for, but apparently for if housing does affect the freeway. We've asked, tried to comply with, working with Caltrans, and we even talked about double-decking the freeway to save expense. We were told by Caltrans that the Pasadena Freeway is historical and it can't be damaged. It's a historical monument. Well, we know it's old, and we know it's historical. Unfortunately, when we look at their newest plan on the variation, they snuck something in there called lowering it by 20 feet. They're going to take the Pasadena Freeway from York all the way to the end and lower it 20 feet. Now, I don't know how you're going to do that without affecting the historical significance of it, but when we wanted to put a bridge on top of it or a roadway on top, they said it couldn't be done against the rules. When we mentioned a certain type of curves for the westerly route, they said those didn't meet state or federal requirements. If you look at the newest variation of the Meridian route, they have those same identical curves that our designer, Jess Reynolds, brought to their attention years ago. No matter what plan we brought forward to work with Caltrans, they had a reason to reject it. The interesting thing about it is they're going to lower the freeway 20 feet. Caltrans will tell you that when you build a freeway through your city, that 50% of the people around the freeway will move out. And that's good for your city because then you can rezone your city and have commercial development come in there and put your high-rises along like Glendale, Burbank, and Pasadena. Well, imagine what it's like with two freeways coming through your city at one time. We have the Pasadena freeways going to be rebuilt. 50% of the people will move out along there. 50% of the people will move out along the Route 7 freeway, and there won't be anyone left in South Pasadena. And I think that's the intent of this whole thing, is to make it a high-rise office complex or something for someone to develop. South Pasadena is proud that we are a community of homeowners, a community of residences, of people working and living and working here. We don't want the high-rises. We've made that very clear. We don't want to be rezoned. We want to raise our kids here. We want second and third generations here, and we like it to be a community like it is. And so this is what we object to when we try and talk to Caltrans. I've tried to negotiate with Caltrans, and we told them time after time we didn't want off-ramps or whatever, and then on one of their Meridian route plans I see downtown, they have a Mission Street off-ramp right in our business district with a El Monte-style park and ride with a 100-car parking lot there with a major bus terminal in South Pasadena. No one in South Pasadena even uses the buses. But they have that there, and so I said, we don't want that. We don't want the on-ramps, we don't want the off-ramps, and so they finally removed that. But they don't listen to us, and they've been trying to cover up this mistake that was made 30 years ago. And if anybody needs to be investigated, it's Caltrans. They have been stonewalling and covering up and playing a word game, but they've made a paper trail that's incredible. That's one of the reasons that they've changed this and went into this Route 7 variation. Their paper trail stinks. They can't cover up their own mistakes as fast as they make them. And it's sad because they're a state agency representing us, but then you pass special legislation removing our rights so that we can't do that. Beverly Hills stopped the freeway cold 10 miles from their city. That was a major artery, Route 2. Beverly Hills doesn't have a freeway. Why? Maybe because they have more congressmen living there than we do. But you're our only elected state representative living in our city, and we're happy about that. But we really don't want this freeway through our town the way Caltrans wants to do it and throw it down our throats. If Beverly Hills gets a freeway, we'll take a freeway. You know?
I made the same offer to the city of Beverly Hills. If they wanted a prison, we'd take one too, but I didn't have any response whatsoever.
The other thing That's a good. I will just comment on one other thing. One of the problems is that with Caltrans is they're the biggest slumlord in the state. They own more property than anyone else in the state. Any private individual, any corporate individual, or any state agency, any federal agency. They are the biggest landlord in the state. If you want to do the state of California a favor, get Caltrans out of the rental business, get them out of the real estate business, because they use that rental property to mess with the towns that they're trying to put freeways through. And they're trying to tear down homes in this community right now, so we have vacant lots. The condition they keep the homes in aren't right either. And I think that if you want to do us all a favor, get them out of the real estate business.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'd like to call on the Honorable William Leonard, who is Commissioner with the California Transportation Commission. Commissioner Leonard.
Thank you very much, Senator. My name is Bill Leonard. I'm a member of the California Transportation Commission. I don't want to distance myself too far from the department, but I would like to point out to you, sir, that we are appointed by the governor to serve as your advisor and consultant. We work with you. We work closely with your committee, the Senate Transportation Committee and the Assembly Transportation Committee. We're very, very pleased that you invited the commission to join in these proceedings this evening. We look to the public for input. This is the only way we can get it is this sort of public hearings, and we thank you very much. As has been indicated by the previous speaker, and as you've indicated yourself, this project is an old one. It dates back into the 1960s, if not before that. In 1984, the Commission concurred with the Caltrans findings that the Meridian alternative was the preferable routing. No part of this project has yet been programmed in the State Transportation Improvement Plan, which covers the five-year period through 1990 to 1991. It is the responsibility of the Commission to adopt the plan. Each year we go through that process, and at this point, this project is not a part of the plan. It must be a part of the plan before there is any work done on the plan specifications or engineering, at least the final plans, before they can be prepared, and which of course comes in advance of the right-of-way acquisition, which of course comes in advance of the actual construction. The estimated cost is $200 million for right-of-way and another $170 to $195 million for construction. For those that wish the route built, the good news is that the route is now eligible for Interstate 4R funds, and by that, and that's when it got changed from Route 7 to Route 710, you have a split of financing. 92% is put up by the federal government and 8% put up with a state match. The bad news is, at least from the financial aspect, is that Los Angeles County is a surplus county, with the Century Freeway and the Harbor Transway, both large and costly projects, carrying a much higher priority than this project. In addition, vying for the I-4R funds on a statewide basis is I-5 in the Santa Ana corridor, with a price tag estimated $800 million, and the Nimitz 880 with an estimated cost between $300 to $400 million. And as you know, Congress adjourned without a transportation bill this year, so we're not sure what's in the future for us. So given today's funding situation, it is highly unlikely that in the absence of a new and additional funding source, that this project would become a part of the State Transportation Improvement Plan before the mid-1990s, with construction at the earliest in the years 2000 or after. One further point, though, I would like to clarify. As I earlier indicated, the Commission does concur with the Department that the Meridian Variation alternative is now the preferred alternative. I've had it reported to me that there is a concern that has been expressed that should this alternative or any other be subsequently adopted that involves tunnels, that as the preferred route, the state would claim funding shortages as an excuse for not building the tunnels. Please be assured, Mr. Chairman, members of your committee, and the audience, that it is a position of both the Commission, and I can speak with authority for the Director, Leo Trombatori, that both bodies have a legal responsibility to make sure all mitigation measures, including the tunnels, that are specified in the environmental report are constructed. There is no equivocation on this assertion. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. If there's any questions that I might respond to, I'd be pleased to do it.
Commissioner Leonard, concerning about timing, and especially in relation to the congressional lack of action in terms of funding, if in fact that transportation bill and those funds are not available, then why are we proceeding with these decision-making processes if the funds are in jeopardy?
Well, Mr. Chairman, there is no decision before the Commission at this time as far as putting it in the State Transportation Improvement Plan. I know the Department, and the Department I believe follows me on the agenda, can speak better to the point that they have been searching for alternates, and whereas there have been environmental reports that have been completed on some of the alternates, there is the modified alternate that has not been completed. It's my understanding that that is now in the process. In order to enter it into the STIP, you must have an agreed-to adopted plan. And at this point, there is not an agreed-to adopted plan. There is a preferred routing, but not an adopted routing.
And that adopted routing cannot occur until funds are available to effectuate it. Is that correct?
It cannot be put into the State Transportation Improvement Plan until funds are reasonably available that it will be constructed during that period. That is correct. However, let me caution, in the last 2 years, the program that has been adopted the years prior to this had indicated there would be funding, but the funding has not come forth. Therefore, the STIP has really slipped for the last 2 years without projects being added.
So then all of this notion of having a freeway coming through this community may be just that, just a notion, unless these funds are available.
Well, funds must be available, yes, sir. But I don't think it's overly premature to get the community definitely involved as to their preferences to routing, and for them to fully understand what the conditions of the routing are, what the plans are, and to know the upside and downside. I think every community needs to know both sides of the issue.
If the Congress wants to balance the budget and reduce the deficit, that deficit is going to come essentially from federal funds that are now being withheld for all states, and their specific procedures will reduce the federal deficit on paper. There's no question about that. My question is then why are we even expending state dollars on a project that may not be realistic if the Congress doesn't come forward with the money that's needed?
Senator, if you would, I would prefer if you'd hold that question for the department.
All right. Do you have any questions, sir? Steve? Thank you very much, Commissioner Leonard, for being with us here this evening, and we hope you get a little bit better.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Let's try and hold our applause, otherwise we'll be here till tomorrow in terms of this hearing. Our next witness is Mr. Joe Sanchez, who is the Deputy Director for Caltrans District 7.
Thank you, Senator.
Welcome.
Caltrans thanks you for having us here today. Caltrans is a strong supporter of community meetings such as this, and we're delighted to be here. At least so far, we're delighted to be here.
I didn't hear an applause when you were introduced. That's quite.
But we will be holding meetings of our own, which I'll be giving you a schedule on a little later on. We also have staff here today to answer specific questions you might have on right-of-way issues or technical issues.
Yes, I will have a number of them.
Fine. I'd like to have Jack Hallen at this time come forward, and then prior to me giving me the status of our schedule on this project, and if we can have Jack Hallen up, give a brief summary of the project.
Mr. Hallen? Where is the information on toxic stuff?
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Senator. As the Senator said at the start of the meeting, the Route 710 or Route 7 corridor, the closure of the gap has had a long, long history since the mid-1950s. It has been studied. These original studies led to a route adoption in 1964 by the California Highway Commission at the time, and Their name has since been changed to the California Transportation Commission. The route that was adopted in 1964 is the Meridian Corridor, which is indicated on this map on center stage. Once that route was adopted, the department and the city of South Pasadena, and for that matter, the other 3 cities involved, Alhambra, Los Angeles, and Pasadena, worked for a number of years in trying to reach agreement on actually a freeway agreement to put the freeway through those 4 communities. This led to, there were impasses after impasses. This led to some final environmental studies in mid-1970, combined with some funding problems that Caltrans found they were in at that time. The studies were finally dropped in the mid-1970s, and really there was no progress on reaching agreement until 1982, when AB 1623 was passed by the legislature. AB 1623, in effect, required the department and the California Transportation Commission to, under a certain timetable, it was about a 2-year-long timetable, required Caltrans to do environmental studies and come up with some recommendations to the Transportation Commission. And the Assembly bill also required that the Commission, within this time frame, adopt or reaffirm an adoption of the route connecting the stub ends of Route 7 in Alhambra and Pasadena. Studies went on for about a year in Caltrans, environmental studies that involved basically the Meridian Corridor and the Westerly Corridor and several variations of the Westerly Corridor. There were public hearings, formal public hearing held in mid-1983 covering these studies. Immediately after those hearings, the Federal President's Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, which is an advisory council as its name implies, held hearings in Pasadena, South Pasadena, to review the routings, the Meridian and the Westerly route, as regards or regarding the historic properties, historic buildings that both of those routes were impacting. That panel, after their final hearing, made several recommendations. They recommended that Caltrans take a look at 4 or 5 other alignments, and those are shown on this exhibit as Line A, which would go up the Arroyo Seco to the 134 freeway. They recommended looking at an E alignment, which is kind of halfway between the Westerly and the Meridian Corridor, that would go through the Altos de Monterrey. They recommended looking at a double decking of the Pasadena Freeway off of the Westerly Corridor, and several variations of that, which would, in effect, double deck the entire Pasadena Freeway and either cut diagonally across to the existing stub or continue northerly due north to an interchange with 210. All right, now Caltrans looked at those variations and concluded in a final state environmental document that the Meridian Corridor was still the preferred alternative. That recommendation was made to the California Transportation Commission, and in December of 1984, the Commission reaffirmed the Meridian route as the adopted route. And basically that's where we stand today as far as what the official adopted route of the California Transportation Commission is. Now, at the time, yes,
we just heard from Commissioner Leonard that there wasn't an adopted route.
there is an adopted route.
There is an adopted route.
I believe he was referring to the variation, which is not adopted at all.
All right. Now, according to my information, the Advisory Council on Historical Preservation has advocated a no-build alternative over the Meridian route. Are you familiar with those recommendations?
Yes.
And why have you ignored them?
We have studied a no-build alternative, and at least at the time of the recommendation to the Commission in 1984, we recommended build rather than no-build. And
Even
build alternative we recommended was the Meridian route.
Now, I recently read an article in the Pasadena Star-News wherein Mr. Jess Reynolds advocated what he calls a historic bypass route, the advantages of which are that it would not affect any historic properties and would displace fewer dwellings and families. Has this route been given study at all?
That route has been studied, and it will be addressed in the final environmental document that goes to the Federal Highway Administration. I'll touch on that in a moment.
Why don't you touch on that right now as to why you're either in favor or not in favor of that?
All right. That route does, in fact, hit a number of historic properties or potential historic districts. Our studies have indicated that it does.
All right.
It does have other impacts.
There have been some various, what I consider discrepancies in terms of the various reports, especially as it relates to tax and revenue losses to the city of South Pasadena. For example, in 1983, you circulated a draft EIS which estimated the city would lose about $550,000 from the Meridian route. Yet your final EIS draft issued in 1984 estimated that the city would lose only $213,000 in revenue. But there was no reason as to why we almost had a $250,000 discrepancy between that year period. And what I have seen happen in South Pasadena has been a growth in business revenues across the community. And so I can't understand why in '83 you estimated $550,000 loss, yet in '84 you estimate only $213,000.
I can't speak to the exact numbers, but it is an updating of our data that causes that difference.
It's very disconcerting when those of us who are in the public policy position try to determine just what reasonable notions are concluded upon, number one. Number two, the other data which indicates to us also is that in your report you state that the city of South Pasadena receives $152,000 per year in rental income from properties held by the state. Is that correct?
If that's what the report says, that's true. I can't dispute it.
Well, that's what your report alleges, but the city records show that they receive only about $79,000 in payments from rental properties. And that amount was only about $62,000, if I recall the study, in 1984 when the report was written. So it's very disconcerting to see these discrepancies, and I'm not satisfied with that answer that you've just given me. I need a little more than that.
I understand. We can check into both of those matters and get a response to you.
Well, do you have staff here that is available to give me a response tonight?
We may have.
Well, Caltrans staff, wherever you
like
are.
that, sir?
All we can say is, Senator, we can get you the information. If we knew this was going to be detailed questions on specific numbers, we would.
Well, my goodness, I think you know my record in the legislature. After 12 years, I don't ask generalized questions. I ask specific questions because the information that we need to gather here is to not only make a recommendation here, but also to the other members of the Senate and also to the members of the Assembly. And those specific questions are very important when you're trying to justify your adoption of a Meridian route to this community, when there are such glaring discrepancies in terms of revenues in terms of rental properties, and I haven't even gotten into the toxic or the school issues which we need to address as well. Is there someone here? Mr. Joe, you said someone was here to answer all my...
Yes, we have some right-of-way staff. Any chance?
Well, let's get them up here.
Any chance? No. I'm afraid we'll just have to research it, Senator. We didn't bring the volumes. It's quite a bit of documentation and backup material that involves these.
Excuse me, you'll have to, please, we'll make sure that everyone can hear, but we do have to have some order, and if you will please come forward and identify yourself if you have an answer to my questions. Why don't you come forward and I'll repeat them.
This is Kay Campbell of our staff on the right of it.
Welcome, Mr. Campbell. In a draft EIS report in 1983, Caltrans estimated that the city of South Pasadena would lose about $550,000 in revenues, business revenues, as a result of the Meridian route. Yet in a report dated 1984, that revenue was decreased to $213,000 without any explanation as to what the discrepancy was. Do you recall that data at all?
No, I don't. All I can say is just the city of South Pasadena gets 24% of our gross income.
Well, I understand that, but in terms of revenues that will be lost as a result of this route, I wanted to know why there was such a substantial discrepancy.
I can't answer that.
All right, you'll get back to me on that. Secondly, in terms of the rentals that are received from the city of South Pasadena through Caltrans as a result of the rental properties, there was a discrepancy between $152,000, and yet the city's records show that they receive only $79,000 in payments from rental properties. Why did that occur? Do you have an answer to that?
I can't answer it.
All right.
All I can say again is that the city would get 24% of the actual gross revenue that we receive.
I'm talking about business revenues that would be lost as a result of the Meridian route, and
Okay.
that's the answer.
I can't answer that one.
All right. Now, in the area of schools, did you write the analysis on this?
No.
All right. Who wrote the analysis on this?
It's not here.
It's not here.
Slip away.
Well, would you take back to whoever wrote the analysis my questions, and they are the following. In respect to the schools, for example, the impact of the Meridian route to schools says nothing about the potential loss of average daily attendance. And in terms of determining school revenues for a community in order to assure that the schools continue at the level that they have been here in South Pasadena, the ADA is a very key factor in maintaining the quality of education. Yet the report doesn't say anything about the loss of average daily attendance funds which could put a small district like this one is at tremendous jeopardy. For example, there was no evaluation of the fiscal impact of dislocating between 400 and 600 students. If you were to move the Meridian route as you have already adopted, what will that do to the quality of education in this community when you are potentially reducing the size of the student body by 400 to 600 students? Where are the revenues going to be coming from if you're going to lose that ADA, that average daily attendance? And that's a real serious concern. But a loss, for example, your IIS also states that South Pasadena could lose up to 10% of the students at any given school site if the Meridian route were built. A loss of 10% of South Pasadena school enrollment would be a reduction of a little over $850,000 to this school district from the state. How do we make that up? Does Caltrans have a special fund to help me out, help me bring that money back to South Pasadena? That factor was not included in the IS report. Now, in reading the resources code in terms of the CEQA, and I've had, I think I know the environmental impact language now more than anyone after trying to fight this prison the last 6 months in my district. Where does that come into account when that may account close to 13% of South Pasadena's school district operating budget? Yet that wasn't taken into account, and I'd like to know why.
We'll try to get back to you with some answers.
Well, how about telling me now, do you take that into account in other EIR or EIS studies?
I think it's normally noted in there, but to my knowledge, I don't believe we've ever supplemented school revenue losses.
No, I'm not even getting to that point.
Yeah.
I'm not even getting to the supplementation. I'm just talking about the fact that your report didn't even articulate what the loss would be in terms of ADA to this particular school district as a result of this route. And I want to know why.
Well, it's a draft document, so it'll certainly include it before it's finalized.
Well,
it has gone out for circulation.
Right. Now, what I'm suggesting is perhaps that if those statistics are included in that draft document, this route might not even be adopted because of the tremendous loss to this school district as a result of that route. And I'm saying that's very, very possible if you gentlemen take that into account. Let's move to noise levels now. Don't leave, Mr. Kennedy. You're not into noise?
I'll address noise.
Jack, you're into noise?
Yes.
All right. This is the draft report. This is the draft EIS on the alternative. All right. Mr. Schneid pointed out to me in the draft report, which I think you're familiar with, Route 710, third draft environmental impact statement.
This is the third draft, yes.
This is the third draft, and it's from your department. And on page 417, it says, and this is in relation to the Meridian Variation alternative, which is what we're talking about, right? That's the route that's been adopted?
No. The Meridian Variation has not been adopted yet. That will be the subject of formal public hearings during a public review process, which will begin very shortly, within a few weeks.
All right, Jack. So then that will be the proposed route, then, the Meridian alternative?
The Meridian route itself, the blue route on this map, is the adopted route. The Meridian Variation
is under study, and that's the subject of this draft document, which will be released shortly.
All right, well then I suggest you look very carefully at page Roman numeral 4-17, where it says, quote, that the Meridian Variation alternative would not create conditions which would adversely impact school enrollment population and thereby force any school to close or shift its student population. Now that's important, Jack, because that doesn't talk about ADA. And yes, you may not have to close a school, but you may have to reduce significantly the quality of education which may be affected by a route and loss of those ADA revenues. Now let's get to noise now. Your report indicates that the noise level in the impacted communities will rise dramatically as a result of the freeway extension. Is that correct?
The reports indicate that there could be 2 dBA up to 20 dBA increase in noise.
Right. Tell me what dBA means.
That's a measure of sound energy, if you will.
Right.
It's a logarithmic scale, so 40 dBA is not half of 80 dBA.
All right, so the noise levels are expected on this particular route to be 67 decibels along much of the route. Is that correct?
If the freeway is to were to make the noise levels higher than that level, we would put in sound walls. The cut and cover tunnels that were mentioned previously, of course, would also dissipate much of that noise. But if noise levels get above a certain level, we would have to put in sound walls to get those noise levels down to the federal standard.
Yes. Well, the federal standard is 67, which
Yes.
is why I asked a specific question, that
Yes.
your report states that this extension is going to be at 67 decibels.
That's
and I
correct.
want to make sure that if this, in fact, is ever constructed, that there is a commitment based upon your draft language that there are going to be sound walls, not that there might.
No, there will be. If we're above that level, there will be, yes. And if there's a commitment in the document, I think the Federal Highway Administration and the California Transportation Commission and Caltrans have said, yes, those walls will happen.
Now, my information leads me to believe, in terms of the low-cost housing, for example, the Meridian route will displace a significant number of low-income renters and homeowners. And in South Pasadena, for example, a significant number of senior citizens, specifically including the residences of 2 convalescent homes, will be displaced. What does Caltrans plan to do with those residents?
I'll have to defer to our right-of-way or environmental people for the answer to that question.
Well, I'm very concerned, Jack, because one of those residential convalescent homes is the Braywood Convalescent Hospital, which has 87 residents. Now, it's not just an ordinary convalescent home. This hospital has one of the few skilled nursing facilities for psychologically impaired seniors, Alzheimer's treatment. It's very tough to get funding at the state level for Alzheimer treatment. And I know you're not a health expert, you're a transportation expert, but I think you ought to be talking to folks, because the director of that home tells me that it will be extremely difficult to find new places for these special patients. Where are we going to place them? Must be, in my opinion, part of this environmental draft report.
When we do acquire right-of-way, we do relocate. We have relocation assistance payments. As I say, I can't speak to the details of that, but
well, let me warn you that you're going to have a very tough time in relocating these types of patients. And I think if you're going to have a report that's going to stand on its own, you're going to have to look very carefully at where you're going to relocate Alzheimer patients when there are close to 87 of them in this one convalescent home, and I'm just talking about one now in the city of South Pasadena. Let's move to air quality now. The IIS and the environmental report seem to contradict each other from my reading. The IIS foresees no significant changes in air quality due to the freeway. Now, that either tells me the air quality is pretty bad already here, or this freeway is not going to have any impact at all, while the PER, the physical environmental report, suggests that air quality will deteriorate in the immediate vicinity. Which is it? Are we going to have an impact on air quality, or are we not?
Do we have an answer? The report does, in fact, say no significant change in the air quality. That is a fact, Senator.
Now, how can that be the case, Jack? Because I know in investigating learning, for example, near the Sears Roebuck store in Boyle Heights, which is also part of this district, we found that the level of carbon monoxide increased 10 times as a result of an elementary school called Soto Street School, which is immediately adjacent to the Santa Ana Freeway. And we had to get special legislation passed to ensure that we put in specific type windows in those old schools, because the air quality was 10 times worse as a result of the freeway. Yet this report indicates to me that the air quality of this proposed freeway extension will have no impact on air quality. That doesn't make sense.
We'll have to get you additional information, Senator.
Well, let me tell you where you're going to get your additional information, Jack. You're going to get it from the physical environmental report, which states that air quality will deteriorate in the immediate vicinity, whereas your report, the EIS report, as you've indicated already, suggests that there will be no impairment of air quality. I'm suggesting to you that there will be impairment of air quality, and I'm suggesting to you, if you're going to be challenged in the courts later down the road in terms of this EIS, that there's going to... Please, thank you. That you're going to have to make sure you have your facts straight, otherwise the state of California is going to be losing a heck of a lot more dollars in terms of lawsuits being filed by the residents of these communities, which will far outdistance the loss in ADA funds to the school districts based upon the discrepancies between those reports. Why do the charts show, in the IAS, why do the charts show a drop in air pollution in future years in this community? Can you explain that to me?
A drop in air pollution?
Yes.
I would have to say that that has to do with improved quality of engines, emissions from moving sources and stationary sources.
And you feel we're going to make strides in that direction?
Let's hope.
The other questions I have are, as chairman of the Senate Committee on Toxics, I've been very concerned about the nature of some of the impacts of waste facilities, toxic waste facilities. How many toxic waste sites do we have along this proposed route? Where is it?
We've identified several from potential toxic waste sites. Now that's
how many?
I haven't the exact number, Senator.
Well, let me let you know how many I've identified. From my data that I've been able to accumulate, we have identified 6 hazardous waste producers or storage tank problems along the proposed Meridian route. Does that correlate with your...
Along the entire Meridian route?
This route, yes.
Yes, that's a good approximation, and that's resulting from current uses.
Right. Now, what I'm concerned about is what ways will the department mitigate those toxic waste sites?
Well, those sites, before we would be able to use the sites, would have to be cleaned up, whether it be by the present user of the property, whether it be by the owner of the property before Caltrans acquires the property, or whether Caltrans does it after acquisition and before construction.
Well, in the 4 years that we've had with this present administration in Sacramento, there has only been 1 cleanup in those entire 4 years. How in heaven's name can you guarantee to this committee that you're going to clean up 6 sites before you even begin construction, when it's taken a governor and a legislature 4 years of inaction to clean up 1 site? How are we going to clean up 6?
This is a given. They have to be cleaned up before we will construct.
Well,
now, the sites themselves may range from a hole in the ground that oil has been dumped into something more major, but hazardous material sites, we deal with each one as a problem.
Well, let me give you an example. Along the Pomona Freeway in Monterey Park, there is a place called Operating Industries.
Yes.
And Operating Industries was thought to be just a simple garbage dump. And then we found out that something more than garbage was being dumped on that piece of property. And as a result of that, we've seen horrendous costs, potential costs, so that some of the owners have gone bankrupt, which means we're stuck with the bill. Taxpayers are stuck with the bill of cleanup. Right now, we're estimating about $40 billion to clean up the toxic waste sites that we have in California alone. These particular sites that I've identified along this route, we haven't even had the Department of Health Services survey yet as to what the potential problems are. And I would suggest if this final EIS is going to be productive, you all better check into how much it's going to cost you to clean up these sites before you can move to construction. Because number one, it's one thing to look at the sites as they occur now. It's quite another to have a detailed report as to let you know what you're dealing with in terms of the cleanup costs and whether or not you'll be able to find any owner who will be fiscally able to clean up the costs. And if you can't, then these sites will go on a priority list in terms of the state site. And I know you're familiar with that and how long it takes for people to get cleaned up on that site. We have Stringfellow still in abeyance. We have the potential threat to the Chino aquifer still in abeyance. Here in the San Gabriel Valley, we have 25% of our drinking waters that have been closed, drinking water wells that have been closed due to contamination, and we don't even know how to clean them up. So I think if this environmental report is going to be accurate, then we're going to have to make sure that you either have the Department of Health Services go out to these sites and let you know what you're dealing with. because you will not give a truthful report to the federal government as to what the potential is for cleanup, number one, and number two, if I heard Commissioner Leonard correctly, he suggests that you can't even begin construction till the year 2000. Is that correct?
The project is not programmed now, Senator, and it could be the mid-90s or the year 2000, yes.
Well, let me give you a little hint that it may take, Star Trek to be redone before you get these things cleaned up. And we might still be having hearings in the year 2050, and hopefully I'll be retired by then, in terms of dealing with this toxic waste site problem, because it is a serious issue that has to be addressed in any environmental impact report. We're seeing that now, for example, in the state prison. Let me give you a quick example. The governor didn't even know that his own Department of Health Services had declared the Southern California gas site, which is immediately adjacent to the Crown Coach site, which was to be used for the construction of a state prison, that his own department had declared it a toxic waste site dump eligible for Superfund cleanup. The same thing may be true, and I'm not maligning your abilities or your competence. I'm just trying to help you along in terms of providing a report and move you in the direction away from this area, because the costs will just be incredible in terms of the cleanup if I see the potential in the reports that I've seen that these possible waste sites may be more than just waste sites in terms of what impact they may have had in terms of groundwater contamination, what impact they've had in terms of soil problems, and what impact we don't know whether certain substances, and I may be totally wrong. I'm just speculating here because I haven't done a report either on any of these sites. I'm just saying that we need to take into account many of these problems as we begin to make reports that are substantive on the areas of environmental impact and clearly environmental assessment, because we don't even know whether some of these chemicals that may be in the soil have leached or moved into other areas. So you may be looking at 6 sites, you may be looking at 12, 15 sites as a result of that problem. So I think that really needs to be, Mr. Sanchez, really needs to be looked at in terms of coming up with a report that you can stand up in court. And obviously, if the more problems you find, the happier I am. But I think that the fact of the matter is that this area really needs to be reviewed much more carefully than it has already.
Senator, the matter of hazardous materials, hazardous waste is of utmost concern to the department, and we do give it high consideration and studies, and the final document will include a good analysis of what's there. What are
That's not good enough for me. I don't want a good analysis. I want an analysis by the Department of Health Services as the potential impact that those sites have along the Meridian route. I want to err on the side of caution rather than to get some report that tells me, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. I've gone through too many of those reports as chairman of the Toxics Committee, where we found later that we have more problems than we were led to believe. And as I said before, I'm not suggesting that you are not anything other than competent. I just want to make you as competent as you possibly can be to find out exactly what the problems are out there. So a good analysis is not good enough for me. I want the Department of Health Services, Mr. Sanchez, to look carefully at these proposed toxic waste sites that are along this Meridian route, because that's the only way you're going to get a correct assessment by toxicologists, by those people by hydrogeologists, by those people who are competent in this area to get an assessment of what's really out there. Otherwise, you're just dealing in the wind, and we've done that too often.
Well, I can guarantee that the department will discuss this with the Department of Health Services.
No, I don't want discussions.
We'll ask them for their...
I want you to request of the Department of Health Services for them to review. Angela Belomo is the director here in Southern California. I think you know Angela. And if not, you ought to make his acquaintance. He is the director of the Health Services Toxics Department down here. I would request that Caltrans request in writing, I'd like to receive copies of those letters to the Department of Health Services, that they review these sites that you've already identified along the route, and let them tell you and let them tell me, Torres, you're totally wrong, everything's going to be okay, or at least tell us what we're dealing with, because right now we don't know what we're dealing with. Okay?
That'll be done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. Are there any other comments you'd like to make?
If I could, I'd like to briefly explain the where we have gone since the, what was it, December of 1984, when the Commission, California Transportation Commission, reaffirmed the Meridian route. The Commission at that time directed Caltrans to prepare a final environmental impact statement for the Federal Highway Administration to approve in order to proceed with federal funding at some future date on the Meridian corridor. In putting that report together, Caltrans did identify that historic properties were being greatly impacted in the downtown area of the city of South Pasadena. So we began a search for a variation of the Meridian route that would miss many of those historic properties. That led us to what's referred to as the Meridian Variation, which is depicted on the map on my right.
And this is a result of the Council on Historical...
This is not specifically their recommendation, but it's an outgrowth of their concern as we perceive it. This particular variation, incidentally, there's another similar map out in the hall, and afterwards anyone's welcome to take a look at this map. That variation cut the number of historic properties in half. From between the Meridian and the Meridian Variation. It reduced, in fact, the total number of historic properties was reduced over any of the other variations. This variation is the subject of the draft third and supplemental environmental impact statement, which we hope to release in the next several weeks. I might ask Joe Sanchez to give you briefly what we will be doing in the next 2 or 3 months regarding this variation and where that will lead us to a final adoption of a route.
Now, in this proposed Meridian route in respect to historical properties, you're talking about how many properties that would be affected that fit that definition?
With the variation?
Yes, with the variation.
The variation has a total of 41 individual and contributive historic properties that would be affected, as opposed to something like 100 and slightly over 100 on the Meridian, the basic Meridian.
So even under the variation, we're going to lose 41 historical properties?
In the city of Pasadena and South Pasadena. Yes.
How many in South Pass?
About 11, I believe.
But he had nowhere to run. That'll bring it.
These 41 historical properties are going to be moved, or are we going to just see them destroyed? Of the 11 that will be impacted in South Pasadena, how many of them will be destroyed, and how many of them will be moved to, as we did in the city of Los Angeles, move some of the historical? Two of the properties. Excuse me, you'll have to come forward and identify yourself for the record.
Cleve Govan of our environmental branch.
Hi.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Two of the properties would not actually be taken. We would be taking some of the lot, but we wouldn't be taking actually any of the property. But all of those that will be left in Pasadena, in South Pasadena, we would try and relocate.
So of the 11 that are slated to be affected by the Meridian Variation route, will be moved somewhere else?
Yes.
Where?
Possibly excess land parcels will be generated by freeway construction.
So they will be placed adjacent to the freeway?
In the near vicinity, yes.
And what will they be used for?
Either residential or adaptive reuse, but probably residential.
When you mean adaptive reuse, what does that mean?
In some cases, it means a person could use it for a restaurant or some type of reuse that's compatible with a single-family structure.
So we will have 11 bed and breakfast inns next to the...
No, I didn't say that. And in this case, most of the homes would be reused as residential properties, yes, in this case, because they're not large enough to be used as bed and breakfast inns, no. I simply mentioned that as an example of adaptive reuse. But in this case, that probably wouldn't take place, no.
All right, and in so doing, those residents will be afforded the opportunity to repurchase the property that they've been excluded from?
I believe so, yes.
Will they be relocated without having to repurchase their own property?
That's a right-of-way question, but I think that's true. We can get a right-of-way person up here to give you a straight answer on that.
Well, let's get the right-of-way person up here.
You want a right-of-way person?
You want a right-of-way person?
I want the right-of-way person up here. I think we've got to have the right-of-way person up here. Yeah, okay, it's 8:10.
Senator, this is Jim Ducini, the right-of-way person.
Mr. Ducini, how are you?
Fine.
Welcome.
I'm a right-of-way person.
To the right-of-way person.
I'm not a housing person, but I'm a right-of-way person.
What is the issue here when you relocate a residence which has been declared a historical site? What happens to the resident and the residents at that point?
Well, I don't know. It hadn't been determined, I guess. What will happen, I would propose, I would say that if they set up an historical site area, and I think there were some plans to put it even on top of the decking for the tunnel to create a historical site, or if it's a historical vacant land extra, something you can move it to, I would think they'd make it available for displacee.
Okay. All right, let's on the right-of-way question, let's say you are a resident of one of these 11 historical properties, and Caltrans comes to you and says, with this Meridian Variation, we've reduced the number of residences that are going to be affected by the freeway. However, you are one of those that will be affected by the freeway. What are the options available to that person?
I would say their options they could probably move that property if they wish to relocate it. But relocating one of these historical properties is very difficult. You've got to have a right-sized lot. It's got to be available. There's people that retain their properties when we acquire and relocate to different sites. Very unusual. Because the problems of moving an older house, a historical house.
Uh-huh. So therefore, it's not really accurate, as you've indicated to me earlier, sir, that these people will be allowed to move.
That's why I brought a right-of-way man up here.
Well, the option.
I think the option's there, Senator. I think there's a lot of problems with moving these homes.
Well, but then it's not fair to say to this committee or to this community that 11 residential properties are not going to be destroyed because all 11 may very well be totally destroyed because of the variables that you've articulated to me this evening. And that is that there may be some problems in terms of their movement. So I don't think it's fair, nor is it truthful, to say that these 11 properties will be preserved or moved into a historical area. So
I think I can say unequivocally that they would not be destroyed. We take the property and we cannot destroy it. We have properties now.
Yeah, but if you can't move it, we had problems like this in the San Francisco area that I'm aware of. We've had problems like this in the Sacramento area where we've had similar problems. And I know we've had problems in terms of Bunker Hill and Chavez Ravine in years past in the other part of this district. I'm just saying if we're going to be truthful, then let's be truthful in terms of the answers to my questions. And I don't think the questions are unreasonable. I'm merely asking how many historical properties would be affected by this new variation. You told me 11. My next question was, what happens to these historical properties? One person says, well, they'll be moved to access freeway land adjacent to the freeway. And then you're the right-of-way person tells me that we may have some problems in terms of dealing with them. Don't you guys talk to each other?
Every day.
Well, it just seems you ought to talk a little more often in terms of finding out what each other's thinking, because that's what causes the dissension. That's what causes people to have fears out in the community, because they get different answers from different people in the same department. And it's just a lot of the public relations problems that departments have, and politicians have them too. A lot of the public relations that we have are due to miscommunication or misunderstandings. And I think if you can just get that straightened out, it'd be a lot more honest about dealing with this whole problem, and a lot less ferocity in terms of some of the problems that have accumulated as a result of this.
I think that the state's intent and all the design that's going into this project is to salvage as many and keep as many historical properties as we can. They're making design changes to miss historical properties to keep them. I don't think you can miss all the historical properties because the whole area is full of them. I don't think you can salvage all the historical properties either.
Well,
our intent is to minimize that as much as possible, but it's an impossible task. If you're going to build a project, you have to face the facts that there are some properties will be demolished.
Well, I choose not. My position has always been not to build, so I don't have those problems. What I'm trying to find out what other alternatives there are. But more importantly than that, my position is irrelevant in terms of what the majority of the legislature or this governor does in approving this particular route. But if it is approved and it is adopted, I just want to make sure that even with my opposition, there are some protections and safeguards for all the issues that I've tried to raise here in a public forum and for the record, to make sure that we're all dealing with them and confronting them. That's all. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Maybe I can just finish with giving you a status of what's going to happen, what we see happening between now and in the near future. We are in the process of finalizing our document. It is still a draft document. We're in the process of finalizing it.
What's your timetable for that, Mr. Sanchez?
Hopefully, we're shooting for this coming month, November, to get it out. At that time, it is circulated to all responsible agencies for review and comment.
Well, if that's the case, when are you going to have time to ask the Department of Health Services to review the toxic sites?
We will include that. We will follow through and ask them specifically. The document doesn't become final until we go through the hearing process.
So the proposed document that you're talking about is still a draft?
That's correct.
Is this draft number 4 then?
It's the first draft of the variation. It's a supplemental draft is what it is.
It's a supplemental draft on the Meridian Variation.
Right. During this review process, which could be 60 days a minimum, and it could be longer than that, we will be holding workshops in the communities, map showings, as well as a formal public hearing. And that will probably occur during the month of January sometime. We will probably be going to the decision maker in this case, who is the California Transportation Commission. We will be going to them probably during the month of March. They are the ones that will make the final decision, not Caltrans. They are the decision makers. And if they do approve it, and they will then give us approval then to finalize the document and seek Federal Highway Administration approval of it. It is after that time, which is probably at least the April or May time frame, that we will have a final adopted environmental document if it goes that far.
All right. Any questions? Thank you very much. You'll be around for it.
Yes, our experts will be here.
All right. Thank you very much.